Donald Trump's presidency is right now engulfed in twin crises, a ballooning national security crisis and an unprecedented political civil war within his own political movement. Having plunged the United States of America into a war with Iran without speaking to the country directly or honestly about that war's objectives or the war's timeline or how it would be measured for success, Donald Trump's own Secretary of State has revealed that the United States of America was essentially dragged into war by Israel.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Rubio's comments right there sent shockwaves across the political spectrum. Here's how the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, summed it up.
There was no imminent threat to the United States of America by the Iranians. There was a threat to Israel. But if we equate a threat to Israel as the equivalent of an imminent threat to the United States, then we are in uncharted territory.
Now, as I said, the reaction is not tied up in the typical partisan confines of our normal political debates. On the right, the reaction was more swift and more furious. Even Steve Bannon has questions. Watch.
If we knew that Iran was going to be attacked and they would attack us, is there no coordination in this? I think that has to be explained.
Our government's job is not to look out for Iran or for Israel. It's to look out for us.
What is happening to the man that I supported, you supported, the man that denounced what happened in Iraq, the man that said no more foreign wars, no more regime change. And we're a year in, and we're in another war, and we've got American troops being killed.
Doing cleanup on aisle 9, Donald Trump. Listen to what he had to say.
Did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that.
It was my opinion. Again, Senator Mark Warner said after a briefing by the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the CIA Director, quote, there was no imminent threat to the United States by the Iranians, end quote. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the war shows no signs of de-escalating, quite the opposite. More than 800 people have been killed across the Middle East, including 6 United States service members. The U.S. embassies in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have closed after Iranian attacks. The U.S. embassy in Lebanon is also closed. In the last few hours, a drone struck the U.S. consulate in Dubai. No injuries have been reported. The Trump administration is urging all Americans in the Middle East right now, in 16 countries in total. Look at that map. Any American in any of those countries is being urged to evacuate. The same government is not offering any means by which to help them evacuate. The BBC reports that somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million Americans live in that region, and they have been left stranded by the Trump administration. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem said this, quote, the U.S. Embassy is not in a position at this time to evacuate or directly assist Americans in departing Israel. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy tweeted this, quote, so the State Department is forcing everyone to immediately leave the region, but is also refusing to help people leave the region. The strike itself is illegal and disastrous, but their lack of readiness for what comes next is unforgivable as well. Incompetence everywhere. After a significant backlash, the State Department announced today that it is facilitating charter flights from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. Adding to the tensions, Donald Trump announced a few hours ago that the U.S. may deploy the Navy to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That's the narrow channel through which 1/5 of the world's oil supply goes through. Iran has threatened to attack any ships that cross the strait, sending oil prices spiking. Donald Trump's war against Iran, a war of choice, turning into a cascading economic, political, and foreign policy crisis is where we start today. Anne Applebaum is here. She's a columnist for The Atlantic. Also joining us, retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Steve Anderson is here. Plus, Washington investigative correspondent for The New York Times, Mark Mazzetti, is here. And with me at the table for the hour, the president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone, is here. Mark Mazzetti, you were here on Friday with some incredible reporting about the three rationales that had been offered up as potential predicates for war in Iran were untrue, false. And I think the last thing I asked you was, are we going to war tonight or this weekend? And you said, I don't know. Just tell me how we got here.
Well, right. As we said last week, the administration was in this sort of 11th hour mode of trying to sell the idea of why there needed to be a war now. And it centered around the idea that Iran was on the brink of having a nuclear weapon and on the brink of having missiles that could hit the United States. And as we discussed, the intelligence didn't support that at all. It was unfounded. The claims were unfounded. It was clear, it's clear now that this was done at the very end when there was a preparation for a strike over last weekend. The interesting thing about Rubio's claims that you showed a clip of about him saying that ultimately United States moved because they were afraid Iran would strike first because Israel was about to strike, right? This was not just a off-the-cuff remark he made. It's the same logic that he used with the Gang of Eight last week when arguing about, the possibility of a war and why it might be necessary. The Democrats at the time in the Gang of Eight, as we reported, saw this as circular logic, and Rubio repeated it yesterday, and as you say, drew a lot of criticism for it.
Anne Applebaum, let me ask you, I think you were also here at the end of last week, and we talked about how Europe has changed because of the political vacuum America created in Ukraine and beyond Trump's, to put it generously, indifference toward NATO. What is the response from our allies about America's Secretary of State essentially saying we are at war because we're responding to what Israel was about to do?
So alongside not explaining to Americans what the war would be about, the U.S. also didn't explain to allies. I think it did warn some allies, so people were aware that there might be something happening in the Middle East last weekend. But there was no effort to build support for the American position. There was no effort to get the European countries who have actually had a lot of interaction with Iran and who know Iran well and who have troops or military capabilities in the region to be involved. That includes France, Britain, Germany, and others. The suddenness of the announcement actually led to the Spanish government refusing to allow Americans to use bases in Spain. It's almost impossible for Europeans really to react in a consistent way because they weren't included in the conversation. And so mostly they're staying on the sidelines. I would hope that at some point down the road, some will start to offer help with some kind of Iranian transition if we ever get to that. That's something Europeans know about and could do. But the lack of building consensus, allies, process, expectations. I mean, that's not just an American domestic issue. It's also an issue with the countries who could, as I say, be helpful to America in a crisis.